Changing Landscapes Bolivia is brought to you in part by Roadrunner Magazine and Outback Motor Tech.
Roadrunner is the most comprehensive resource for motorcycle touring and travel. Read, discover, ride.
Take a landscape artist from Canada, Dominik. Put him on a motorcycle. Well, try to put him on a motorcycle and send him to Bolivia for 6 weeks to paint some stunning scenery.
Hola.
Then take his buddy, Scott Wilson, a travel writer who never shuts up. Put him on another bike, and what do you get? Well, you get lost. You see, the GPS stopped working and the map wasn't worth a crap. Having said that, when they got lost well and met some great people, ate some fantastic food, and saw what they came for. Changing landscapes. Follow along as Dominik and Scott rip through Bolivia, from the Altiplano to the Andes, from dubious river crossings to time out in the Amazon, from street carnivals to salt flats, and from a road of death to a mountain full of silver. Bolivia is a dream, an old-fashioned dream full of grinning characters, stodgy food, and where adventure is the norm. It's one of those places you'll want to go back to over and over and over again. "6 weeks in Bolivia." And yes, believe it or not, they're still friends.
Cheers.
This is Changing Landscapes Bolivia.
Oh, here's the Nomadic Bull
And the Zen guy.
and welcome to Bolivia!
Our country.
Woo!
Dominik and I had been separated by mechanical breakdown in Bolivia. He'd caught a flight back to Cusco, Peru, while I had ridden up from the salt flats in Bolivia, so I was playing catch-up. He had passed over this road the day before, and it was interesting to see during the editing process of how this ride to Machu Picchu, or pilgrimage if you will, had affected us both. Well, I just had to pull over for a few minutes and take it all in. Machu Picchu is a place that I've wanted to go see ever since I saw a photo. That was probably 35, maybe even 40 years ago. And coming over this mountain road and seeing the mountains shrouded in mist, you know, with the sun breaking through here and there. Like, it really is a spiritual place. And there's something more than beauty. There's something that can't be described. It can only be felt. And I'm feeling it right now. I'm loving it. Anyways, I'm going to carry on down the road, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my ride and have a cold beer when I arrive at Santa Teresa, where hopefully I'll meet Dominik. All right, cheers.
And so I have a remaining 6 days before I head to Canada, so I'm heading to Machu Picchu. Always my dream since I was a child. I always envision very particular spots around the world where I would like to visit. And Machu Picchu was one of those places, obviously, since I was quite small. So it is quite fun to realize your childhood dream at the age of 43, and that view, what you see in a bag, always stuck in my mind from looking at the books and photographs and films.
As it turned out, we arrived in Santa Teresa within a half hour of each other. We are at hydroelectric station in Peru.
Yeah, it's quite late in the morning
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
not for Wilson.
He's an asshole.
My glow plugs are glowing.
Anyways, the train's coming. The jumping off point for trips to Machu Picchu is a town called Agua Caliente. The town is inaccessible by road, so we rode our motorcycles from Santa Teresa to a place called Hydroelectrica and left them in the care of some locals for a small fee. From there we caught the 40-minute train ride to Agua Caliente.
Good morning, Mr. Medlinski.
Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
How are you?
Good, look at that dog.
Beautiful dog. Yeah. So here we are in Agua Caliente, which is right below Machu Picchu, which is up there, over there, over there. We're not sure exactly yet.
Kind of hard to tell because the cliffs are like that.
Very cliffy.
Until this trip, I never really understood what Machu Picchu was. For me, it had always been nothing more than a spectacular structure in a stunning setting. The ruins, nestled in the Andes at an elevation of 2,500 meters, have provoked debate for decades as to what its purpose really was. Today's consensus is that it was a royal retreat for the Incas from their capital, Cusco, 80 miles away. History aside, the structure and the setting are what bring the majority of tourists, as to watch the sun hit the ruins in the early morning is perhaps as spiritual an experience as one can have.
All right, this is Scott Wilson reporting from Machu Picchu. Been a great trip, great day, awesome. One off the bucket list, crack on.
We have been dodging a lot of things on these trips. Dogs, Wilson dodging me, and recently we've been dodging the guards here because they said we need a Ministerio Permito para Cultural para Peru. So, but we said we are amateurs. So anyway, they're pretty funky and about the camera, especially with the microphone, because they think we're maybe filming for National Geographic and the country of Peru is losing money.
So we're dodging the camera, please.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Medlinski just pointed out some defects here. The brickwork, the way it comes down. Okay, these are dry joints. There's no mortar. Basically, if Mike Holmes was here right now, he'd probably give the workers shit, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah. Sure.
I mean, how
It
can
wouldn't
you...
be hot. It wouldn't be approved. by Canadian standards.
All right, is Nomadic Wool
And the Zanga from Machu Picchu.
from Machu? Yeah, that's Machu Picchu. It's not the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's not the CN Tower.
It's Machu Picchu, double C.
Double C. Yeah. So, anyways, after 6 weeks on the road, here we are.
Yeah, we didn't drive here on the bikes, although we had full intentions of driving around the railway tracks. That was this guy's idea. But I think we would have been thrown in jail as terrorists.
They have machine guns here,
Yeah.
so it's a bit of a deterrent.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah, probably wouldn't end up good for us and the project.
So you noticed after 6 weeks, the local food I'm developing a stutter.
Too much chicken. He lost a lot of weight.
Too
Eh?
much chicken. Anyways, it's been an awesome trip, eh?
Yeah, only a few days to go. I'm gonna be home, and I told my wife, no more chicken, honey.
More chicken, just pizza.
Okay, Mr. Modlinski, is there anything you would like to add as we leave this beautiful place?
It's starting to rain.
It's starting to rain. Basically what he's saying is he's ready for pizza.
That's right. Winter, comfort, I'm going back to pizza. I'm looking for a profound statement.
Yes. This is a very spiritual place, and all you can think of is pizza.
Food comes first before the soul.
Expertly planned tours complete with maps, GPS files, and area information. Roadrunner is the most comprehensive resource for motorcycle touring and travel. Read, discover, ride.
Back home in Canada, we got down to work. The whole point of these trips for Dominik is to gather reference material for larger gallery paintings. And sure enough, before long he had some beauties. As for me, well, I started putting this series together and writing my book. One of the reasons I love film and writing and Dominik landscape painting is because they allow us to revisit. A lot of time we don't really process what's on the ground as we hit it, but going through footage and putting brush to canvas gives time for contemplation and helps create a more complete picture. Bolivia was a real surprise. Sure, we knew there were going to be spectacular landscapes, but just how spectacular came as a shock. Riding up from Chile allowed us to get a sense of the altitude, but on the Altiplano, the volcanoes made us feel as though we were back at sea level. But we were already close to 4,000 meters. Then there was Tiwanaku and the Isla del Sol and Lost Civilizations. It turns out Peru doesn't have a South American monopoly on traipsing through bygone eras. The Inca were here too, and the Tiwanaku people before them.
There are passages within the structure and creates a kind of a mystery.
After that were the Andes Mountains and the Amazon Basin and the Beni River. Following our guide, Wilman, we saw a different side of Bolivia in the jungle that I hadn't known existed. Leaving our motorcycles behind, it was a treat to go upriver and explore the jungle, where we saw some animals, met some great people, and of course, slept in a jungle camp. Then it was back to the Altiplano, and a city that had survived for close to 500 years because of a mountain. The tour of the Potosi silver mines in Sierra Rico was definitely one of the highlights of our trip.
And these miners will come in here and they'll do this for a month for 2,000 Boliviana, 3,000 Boliviana.
To see the miners at work was a sobering experience, and our tour, which lasted 5 hours, was one of the best I've ever been on. Highly recommended. Then came the salt flats. What a bizarre and beautiful place.
Doesn't get any more extreme than that. Flat, salt bed of ancient sea.
Substitute water with salt, boats with land cruisers, and let it rip across the world's largest salt flats. It is as surreal an experience as one can have. And connecting all these treasures was a road system that taxes a person physically and mentally. One that really makes you work for the next treasure, but one that provides great adventures for those that seek them out. There was dirt, gravel, rivers, dodgy ferries, rickety bridges, and some cutting-edge roads that meandered through stunning scenery. Getting around Bolivia is all about adventure and surprises. And thankfully, our navigation skills were up to the task.
We're heading out today on a road to God knows where, so we'll see you tonight. According to the GPS, we're nowhere.
Yeah, we are not on the road, nothing.
What's the name of this town we're in?
Starts with CH.
You know what town we're in?
I have no idea.
Okay, we have a National Geographic map, which says there's a road, but
Well, the National Geographic is all about adventure and exploration, and the road shows gravel, but it does not exist. It's in a projection.
And as for my travel partner, well, this was the first time I'd gone on a motorcycle adventure with a friend, and my worries were soon put to rest by Dominik's style of travel. He didn't mind roughing it in the least. I just had to work at his Polish-Canadian humor, which I have to say I enjoyed more than a bit. It made for some interesting days.
So we try a bank robbery tonight?
yeah.
I'll have pizza and then we roll in and take some silver, okay?
Delicious. Mmm. Yeah? You say, Mr. Medlinski?
Yeah, it's highly visually appetizing.
Is it edible?
I'm sure it's edible.
So what about the food? Well, Bolivia isn't the first country that comes to mind when we discuss culinary delights. 100 variations of chicken and potatoes doesn't provoke a lot of excitement, but the kitchens and cooks made up for an enthusiasm what they lacked in variety. To be honest, I quite enjoyed the food.
It's pretty good.
And fortunately, Dominik was able to maintain a high intake level of pizza, so he was happy too.
I think right now we're just gonna go get some pizza.
Alright.
And the accommodation? Well, it was challenging at times, but a lot of fun. More often than not, hot water was a treat, not the norm. Internet was sketchy, if it existed at all, and the beds, for the most part, were rudimentary. But at the end of a hard day's ride, a bed is a bed. There were times we stayed in lovely hotels in the tourist areas. There was a lively hostel where everyone sat around a giant table for breakfast. There were a couple of nights in the jungle with all the other critters. And of course, there were a couple of very memorable stays in rooms that made for good storytelling.
I'm not sure whether this is a step up or step down from last night, but we have no toilet, but there's definitely running water outside. Yeah.
So when you take the people, the food, the accommodation, the scenery, the tours and mishaps and roll them all together, you have a grand adventure. An adventure worth filming, worth writing about, and worth putting oil to canvas. I talked at the beginning of this series of the 3 acts of a good motorcycle adventure. The act of riding, the act of traveling through changing landscapes, and the act of meeting people along the way. In Bolivia, all 3 acts exceeded our expectations. The country is a powerhouse for those seeking something different in a real adventure in an old-fashioned kind of way. In many places, safety is an afterthought, not a priority, and there is a rawness to the country that rivals its scenery. Nothing is glossed over here. There are no soft edges, no pretensions to grandeur. Things are the way they are, and you either embrace them or you go home. We chose to embrace them, and were rewarded for our efforts. But back to the 3 acts. In my experience, it's always been the 3rd act, the people you meet along the way, that has made or broke a trip. In Bolivia and Peru, the people were an unanticipated treasure. Their humility, their kindness, their enthusiastic nature, and their willingness to share openly so much of what they had so little of. Both Dominik and I were taken aback by just how friendly they were, so I guess it would only be fitting that we close with a little tribute to them. So, here we go, and thanks for coming along.
Hola! How you doing? High five! Hey!
Hola.
Hola! Okay! Okay! Hey! Hi, Canada! He's awesome! Hola, hola, hola! Nice to meet you! Oh,
Almost 500 years the miners are working.
oh, gracias! Wonderful. Yeah.
Después comes el ticket.
Signal! All right.
Good luck.
Let's go for conversationalist.
And if you enjoyed this show, here's a trailer for our upcoming Vancouver Island series. Why is it that whenever we feel the need to go somewhere exotic, we get on a plane and leave? What's wrong with our own backyard? What's wrong with Vancouver Island? Well, as it turns out, nothing at all.
Wasn't sure for sure that it was in fact an island.
Vancouver Island is as exotic as it gets, but it's a different kind of exotic. It's not palm trees and margaritas. It's giant cedars and single malt. It's a pristine and wild exotic.
Fish whisper and sardines, they're on camera.
Hi, my name is Scott Wilson, aka the Nomadic Bull. Join me and my good buddy, Dominik Medlinski, the Zen guy, as we explore our island.
54 and 50.
We'll head up north and meet Joey and learn about Cole Harbor. We'll take in a potlatch in Alert Bay and we'll ride the rails in Port Alberni. And maybe we'll just have a tipple or two. We'll meet great locals, hear fascinating stories, ride through stunning scenery, and wallow in a beautiful wilderness setting. Vancouver Island is a gem, our gem, and it's time to share it. This is Changing Landscapes Vancouver Island.
So here's the Nomadic Bull and the Zen guy.
And the acting base commander for CFB Esquimalt today.
The museum is open to the public Monday through Friday, 10 till 3:30.
And admission is by donation, well worth it. Go and check it out.